So this happened last night. John Eastman, the disgraced ex-president's co-defendant in the case to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia, as well as an unindicted co-conspirator number 2 in Jack Smith's case, went on Fox News to discuss the details of the ongoing case against him, claiming that there is no evidence that he knew he was trying to illegally overturn an election. Watch that.
On the RICO side of the Fulton County case, that would require findings of bad faith. That would have to be you all basically agreeing implicitly, explicitly, that y'all knew that this was all phony. And to that you say?
Well, they've got all the evidence. They've got all my emails. My phone was seized over a year ago, so they've got all that stuff as well. And I challenge them to find a single email or communication that supports that implausible theory.
Challenge accepted. So here's what's in his own emails. This is what the January 6th Select Committee found in that guy's emails. Watch.
Dr. Eastman himself admitted in an email that the fake electors had no legal weight, referring to the fake electors as, quote, dead on arrival in Congress.
So even after the attack on the Capitol had been quelled, Dr. Eastman requested, in writing no less, that the vice president violate the law by delaying the certification and sending the question back to the states. Is that correct, Mr. Jacob?
It is. Just a few days later, Dr. Eastman emailed Rudy Giuliani and requested that he be included on a list of potential recipients of a presidential pardon.
We're back with Glenn and Barbara. Far be it from me to feel bad for anybody who platforms John Eastman, but I kind of feel bad for anybody who platforms John Eastman. I mean, I don't even understand what in his imagination, his defense is, Barbara McQuaid. An attorney like John Eastman has a reputation for being intelligent, can count to 60 as well as I can. They lost 60 of 62 cases. There was no fraud. They never found any. And most of them admitted it in emails and phone calls to others, people like Rusty Bowers, that there wasn't any fraud.
Yeah, this is all a PR campaign. So in court, this kind of defense will fail miserably because they'll have the emails, and he knows they'll have the emails.
Right.
But it seems to me the game at this end is convince as many voters as possible that this is all a bunch of nothing, that there is no crime here, that they've done nothing wrong, that this was a good faith legal challenge. And if Donald Trump can get himself elected before this case ever goes to trial, by convincing enough people that this is all made up, then that's really the best defense they have. They may find that the trial date happens before they can go to trial, but, you know, trial dates get set and reset and adjourned for various reasons. I have heard people I talk with, people who are reasonably intelligent and function in this world, say, I hate to see the way the criminal justice system has been weaponized against Donald Trump. And they are listening to people like John Eastman and believing people like John Eastman. So I think they will continue to pound the airwaves with these falsehoods, verifiable falsehoods, because they trust that the public does not have the ability to fact check them.
I mean, obviously, she does have the ability to fact check him. Those January 6 hearings took place on live TV. I don't remember if they were on Fox or not. I guess another thing we've learned, Glenn, is that back in the court of law, state of mind is so central. And we have a lot of public-facing evidence of Eastman's state of mind. I mean, we know that Eastman is the one who said, we'd only lose 7-2 in the Supreme Court. No, you're right, 9-0. So he knows that his gambit is unconstitutional. He knows it's illegal. He knows it violates the Electoral Count Act. And he knows that he personally committed crimes. That's why he seeks a pardon. He seems to be in it's not a technical term, but deep doo-doo legally.
That is a legal term. I don't know the Latin for it. But if someone could tell us what the Latin for that is. No, but I think, like, all you need to know is that I believe excerpts from, I could be wrong about this, I've read a lot of indictments over the past couple of weeks, but I think there is a quote from one of Eastman's emails in Jack Smith's indictment of Donald Trump. I mean, there is a general sense, I think, and I think Barb hit the nail right on the head. And you even saw it in the courtroom on Monday with John Lauro, Trump's attorney, essentially making the same kind of arguments you'd hear them make on cable TV, right? That they are persecuted. So they appear to be entirely convinced that making this larger political argument whether it extends as far as the notion of Trump getting reelected and issuing a new set of pardons, or influencing a jury pool, perhaps. But they just seem, all of them, and this includes a lot of Trump's legal team, apparently, at least in the Washington case, that making this case in public in these broad kind of political terms is going to advantage them in the long term. But I'm telling you, we've seen in court after court, judges are not accepting these arguments.
Glenn, why do you think Trump didn't pardon himself and Eastman and Chesebro and all these Rudy before he left?
That's a really good question. I've read a lot about this, and no one really has an answer for that. He could conceivably have done that. I think he probably didn't realize the extent of the trouble that he was in, and I don't think, and I know this from having spoken with people in his orbit, I don't think he really thought the Justice Department ultimately would go after him. I think there was a general sense that he was going to be able to operate as he has in the past, being able to sort of get by without having these really big confrontations with the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Barbara, there's like an interesting piece of how he operated and the brazenness with which he broke the law and the brazenness with which he sought to get other Republicans to break the law with and for him, that in some ways provides Jack Smith with some of his best evidence against him.
Yes, I think that breaking the law with impunity is just how Donald Trump rules. I think it's part of the authoritarian playbook of showing that I am above the law, I'm untouchable. Giving himself a pardon is an admission of guilt in some ways. No pardon means I don't think I did anything wrong. But as a result of that, because he does so many of these things in broad daylight, in some ways it provides its own defense, right? How could I possibly have thought that was wrong? I did it in broad daylight. And yet I think that argument will likely fail because we've got recordings of the call with Brad Raffensperger. We've got some of the things that he has said publicly. And so I think that at the end of the day, if the rule of law holds, and I believe it will, these statements will be used against him to convict him.